I just knew that death was right around the corner and that my life was not going to last much longer. I grew up around Amish people in Pennsylvania. We grew up learning the Bible, and we would go to different churches. And I remember learning the stories of the Bible and watching different videos and cartoons of the different stories of what happened in the Bible. And that's kind of how I knew about Jesus Christ. But I never really read the Bible myself. I did memorize John 3:16 as a kid, and there was a few other verses that I heard often. When I was about 8 years old, we moved to New Jersey, South Jersey. At that point, I really had to look up to my older siblings for guidance, and they really influenced me, and they had some friends that were really not good friends and did some bad things. And I had a friend that I used to go to his house, and he would always have food at his house. I would try to be at his house as much as possible. And I basically lived there. I loved being there because there was no rules. And we could play video games, any video games we wanted, watch any movies we wanted. Of course, we watched a bunch of rated R movies. And we would just stay up late and just listen to Eminem and listen to 50 Cent and rap music and play Grand Theft Auto. And Grand Theft Auto was something that we played nonstop, and shooting games. And so this just created violence in my heart. We would look for ways to get excited. But I remember telling myself that I'm never gonna do drugs and I'm never gonna drink alcohol and things like that. And I was into sports, and sports was really what I put more of my focus on. And so I played soccer, I played football, I played lacrosse, I wrestled, and I played all different types of sports, and I enjoyed all of them. And I met a lot of friends that way, and I just felt like I was doing really good with myself when I was around those types of people and doing those types of things, and it made me feel really good about myself. And people really tried to encourage me. They tried to help me out and lead me in the right direction when they told me, man, we're so happy to have you on our team, and people would have me over and I would feel special. And so there was part of me that wanted to be the bad guy, but there was also part of me that wanted to be a good guy. And so I just felt like it was like pulling me in. I felt like there wasn't like an escape from people telling me these things. I remember I went to my friend's house. I didn't even know this guy, but he heard some things about my family. It was one of my new friends in high school, and his dad, grabbed my head and banged it on the table in front of all these people, and he said, "You're gonna be a drug addict just like your brothers." And I just thought to myself, what is this guy talking about? And I was just so humiliated. It just seemed like they were after me the most. It seemed like I was always a scapegoat. So that just kind of created a lot of anger in me. I remember not having food when I would go home growing up, and not having a father in my life, not having a dad. And I used to get in fights all the time. I was such an angry person. I was out of control. I had no control over my emotions, and I always tried to make people fear me. My mom tried to provide for us, but after a few years, she couldn't do it, and she would just leave and not come home. I wouldn't see her for a while. And so it just made school really tough, and I always had no future in education, and I always thought there was no point in even trying. And there's a few times, and this really just broke my heart, of my mom just crying death cries. I just felt like she was dying, and I really feel that she was dying inside. And I think that divorce really weighed down on her, and she just seemed to lose it and not really be there anymore. I didn't really have my mom anymore. And once I got to high school, I was doing really good in sports, but I started to notice that those were the types of people that first got me into smoking weed and drinking alcohol. And so when I started down the path of smoking and drinking, I thought that was cool. All the kids were doing it. One of the main things that I cared about was what the girls liked. And when I noticed that they liked smoking weed and they liked smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol, I thought, okay. And so I started to do that, and I started to do it all the time. But I realized that I could not live like these other kids, because they were getting money from their parents for recreational activities, and I wasn't getting that. And so I remember working at a job trying to play football. I was in 10th grade, and my brother got me this job at a gas station, And I was trying to play sports and go to school and have this job. And I remember my friend saying to me one practice, he said, "Shane, what are we even doing here? This is a waste of our time. Let's just work. Let's just work and party." And I thought, you're right. I'm wasting my time. And I remember walking away from that field thinking, this is my last day, I'm going to play. And that was a huge turning point in my life, because the moment that I didn't have sports, the moment I wasn't focused on being an athlete, was the only thing holding me back from complete indulgence in a criminal lifestyle. So I was in school, but I just kept getting called down to the office. There wasn't a week that went by that I wasn't called down to the office. And I would get suspended all the time, and I would just keep getting suspended. And I remember my principal finally told me, he said, "Shane, we're just gonna have to bring you to another school. We're gonna have to bring you to Sequoia, this other school, and you're gonna have to go to this detention school. Or either that or you just get expelled." And I thought, what am I doing? Like, I can't even do this. I need to just work full time and save up. Why am I even here? And I just remember having a complete breakdown and just leaving school and just totally clinging to smoking marijuana and trying to sell it to my friends. And so I did that and tried to have parties all the time at my house, and I just gave up on school. And at the same time, I got a huge fight with my dad, and that's really what led me down a path of drugs and depression. And so I just had no hope in my life. There were so many times where I would just think about dying. There's so many times that I would just want my life to end. I just thought, I'm gonna die young. I'm gonna die at least by the time I'm 20. And there was just so many times where I just wanted to kill myself. I was working this job, and these kids started to get me into deeper and deeper drugs, and they started to introduce to me pills and different prescription medicine and things. And so when I started doing that, I started to sell drugs even more. And I had a girlfriend that I was living with in my house, and it was a few years that we were together, and I was with her for a while, and I thought, this is the girl I'm gonna marry. And I totally had my heart set on her. I was just such a horrible person. There was one day that my friend came by, he said, "Hey, I saw your girlfriend with some other guy." And from that moment, it just drove me down a path of anger. I was just filled with rage. And so in order to get over the fact that I was breaking up with her, I just had to get high every day. And so I started to do pills every single day. And that was the only way that I could get through this breakup. And so when I started doing that, I started to sell these pills. I started to sell drugs and just whatever I could get my hands on. And I just started to go down this path of being a drug dealer. And I just watched movies like American Gangster and Blow. And I thought, okay, that's who I'm gonna be. That's what I'm gonna have to do. And I was just determined in my mind that I was going to get rich off of drugs so that I could buy my mom a house, and that I could redeem my mom's life, and that I can give her everything that she deserves. And I was just determined to help my little sister, who was much younger than me. And so I started to go down this path of drug dealing, and it was a dark road, and I just remember being held up by guns, and having to go in dark alleys to get drugs and do really sketchy things that really risked my life many times. And I would be high in doing it, and I would live in motel rooms so I could sell drugs, and I would skip from motel room to motel room, and shamefully I just felt I had no other option. I couldn't get a job, and if I could, it couldn't pay any of my bills, and I felt this was my only option. And so I was just hoping to die on drugs. And I remember my friend who was doing drugs with us, we were starting to do drugs that we were getting from Philadelphia, and it was just getting cheaper and cheaper. And I got in trouble. I got busted a few times. It really scared me. I never wanted to be in jail. And I was getting arrested all the time and being thrown in jail, and everyone's starting to cut me off. Everybody, all my friends, all of the people that I knew, one by one, it was just more and more people just didn't want to hear from me anymore. They didn't want to talk to me. They didn't want to be around me. I was just known as that bad person in town. And I was just known by the police. I was known by everybody that I was that person that you don't want to be around. I remember trying to really change my life, and I wanted to get into the movie industry, and that was my passion. So I got off drugs and I cleaned myself up for about a month. And so I went to New York City and I auditioned for an agency to be an actor, and they brought me on. And going all the way from South Jersey to New York City for films was a lot of money. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of energy. And I just remember getting like no sleep and being on set for 14 hours just to be an extra, not getting paid for it, and then going back down to just work at my job. And so I did so many things that really did change my life for a little while, but the drugs just called me back. And I would have friends who would call me, and I thought, there's no escape from this lifestyle, because the only friends that I've had for the last 5 years are druggies, and that's all they're gonna ever wanna do. That's the only people I could get along with. I don't even know how to talk to people who don't do that type of thing. I don't even know how to be around those type of people. I've tried, and I feel uncomfortable being around people who don't do stuff like that. And so I couldn't do it, and I fell back into it. And I remember getting back into the drugs and thinking, this is it for me. I'm not getting out of this lifestyle. And I remember going to my friend's house with my other buddy, and we were sitting in the car, and we got a phone call that said he died. And we pulled up to his house, and I saw the ambulance, and when I saw the ambulance, it really came to life. I was like, wow, this kid really did just die. All it had to take was somebody lacing drugs once for you to die. And so you're taking a risk every time you take these drugs. And so that's why I thought, okay, death is right there. But I didn't really care, because I had no hope in life. My whole life was dark. My family, I never had really a family. We were all torn apart. And I never had a home. I had never had somewhere to go to for rest. I couldn't even enjoy it anymore. It wasn't even to enjoy it. It was just to escape reality. And my brother called me. He witnessed to me a few times before, and he came and he witnessed to me what I remember I was high on drugs, and I was in the car with him, and he said to me, he was just talking, and I guess he was going to church, so a lot of scripture was in his mind all the time, and he just said John 1:1. He said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him. Without Him was not anything made that was made. And I remember when he said that, and I just thought to myself, what is that? It was just so obvious that it was supernatural. Like, what even does that mean? You know, and who says that it's actually recorded in a book, that people are saying this person is God? And it was just mind-boggling to me. And I just remember thinking, wow, well, you just ruined my high. And I remember going back to our friend's house, and I was just high on drugs, and I went back home, and I was sitting on my chair, and it was really dark, and I wanted it to be nice and dark in the room, and so I can enjoy my high. And I was just laying there trying to nod out, and my brother came in the room and saw me, and he was so freaked out when he saw that I was in this room nodding out, that he went back out into his car, grabbed his Bible, and he came into the room. He said, "I'm not gonna let the devil have my brother." And I remember just thinking to myself, whoa, like, am I seriously that bad? Now, of course, I yelled at him, and he left. But I remember in the back of my head just thinking, I must be so wicked. I must be in such a dark place that my brother had to say, I'm not going to let the devil have my brother. And that really scared me, because I thought, man, am I really that messed up that the devil has me? And I remember the same brother, he asked me, he said, "Shane, do you want to move to North Dakota with me?" And so he said, "You can move up here, you can help me pay rent, we can live in an apartment, I'll make a lot of money, and hopefully eventually maybe you could get the same type of job I have." And I remember my brother saying to me, "Shane, you can move up here with me, but you have to go to church." And I thought, no problem, I'll go to church with you. I don't have a problem with that. And so I was able to get on the plane, and I took off, and I remember just looking down and, am I seriously, this is like a dream. How am I getting out of this lifestyle? How am I getting away from this? I thought it was a trap. I thought I was going to die there. I thought that was it. But I remember my brother coming home from the oil fields, and I was talking to some people after a church service one day I was getting drunk all the time. I was drinking. I told myself I wouldn't go back to drugs, but I was drinking all the time, going to bars. And my brother came up to me and he said, "Oh, Shane, you're a Christian now." And I said, "Yeah." And I thought, man, is he going to try to embarrass me here in front of these Christians and call me out and try to make me feel like I'm not a Christian? And he said, "Shane, when were you born again?" And so I had to think back. I remember I grew up learning about Jesus. I remember I went to church a few times as a little kid. And certainly there was a time in my life where I was born again. I said, when I was a little kid, I think I got saved at camp. But I lied to myself. I really convinced myself, yeah, I'm fine. But I didn't really care. I didn't really care about God that much. I didn't take it that seriously. I started to find the wrong friends at work. I had 2 jobs and I was working as a waiter, and I started to find some friends at my waiting job. I was working at Olive Garden and started to find the wrong people to hang out with who were smoking weed and doing other things. And before I knew it, there were some new kids who actually were doing the same exact types of pills that I was doing in New Jersey. And so I told myself I was going to change my life, and here I am leaving church, going to bars, becoming an alcoholic, smoking weed again. There was just no hope for me. With all the mental capacity and power in my mind and physically that I could possibly give to change my life. I already tried to change when I was 21, and I tried to change when I was 22, and there was just no changing. I was that criminal, and I was gonna be that way forever. Remember, I had this girlfriend. She was a Catholic. I met her at my job, and I was always trying to impress her. I wanted her to think that I was a Christian. I wanted her to think that I was this good Christian guy. And I went to work one day and I was wasted. My boss said, "You're drunk, you're fired." And I went home. I was hanging out with my friends, just trying to ignore the pain inside. But I went back in my room thinking, I'm the biggest loser I know. I can't hold a job. I'm a drug dealer. I'm a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. And I made the biggest fool of myself. The only person I had to live for, this girl that I was trying to get to know for a few months, and she wants nothing to do with me. And I remember trying to call her, and she wouldn't answer the phone. And I just thought, wow, I am such a scumbag. I'm totally lost. I have no idea what to do. My whole life I was so independent. I didn't need my parents. I didn't need anybody to help me. Nobody could help me with anything. I would do it myself. I'll find out ways to survive. I'll find ways to make money. But this was the first time in my life I really just felt, no, I can't do it. I'm a loser, and I'm always gonna be that way. And I just remember thinking, how do I kill myself? How can I escape reality? Because the drugs and the alcohol aren't doing it anymore. I wake up and it's worse. And I thought, how can I get out of this life? And I just remember looking around my room and wanting to end my life and thinking about ways on how I could die. And I thought, I had fear though of death, because although I wanted to feel like I didn't fear death, I did. And when I really thought about dying, I had to think, what is really gonna happen when I die? Where am I gonna go? What's gonna happen? Am I gonna fall down a tunnel, a black hole for a few miles? Like, what is gonna happen when I die? And it was a scary thought to have the unknown, to have no idea. And I just remember sitting there thinking, well, let me get out of here. Let me leave the state. But it was already February. The snow was up to the roof. And I remember looking at my truck thinking, this isn't gonna get me anywhere. And so that was it. And I just started to really come to tears. I started to come to tears. And I was completely humiliated. I came to the end of myself. I had little to no pride left in me. I was in my room and I was all by myself. And I remember I looked and I saw on the counter the Holy Bible, and I thought, that is the only thing that I can go to for answers. That is the only thing that I can turn to for some real truth. What does that book really say? I never really took the time to try to understand it. Anytime I did when I was in jail before, I tried to read the Old Testament, and that never made sense to me. And so I opened the Bible and I sat there and I said, let me go to the New Testament, because I know it's closer to our time. It's not as old and it's a little easier to understand. And I remember starting to read that and reading about Jesus Christ, and it just breaking my heart about how Jesus Christ died for my sins. And this whole time I knew this. I knew Jesus loved me unconditionally. I got to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14, and it says, "Be no more children, tossed to and fro, carried about by every wind of doctrine, by the sleight and cunning craftiness of men, whereby they lie in wait to deceive." And I thought, I'm being so deceived by the world. I'm listening to this rapper. I'm listening to my friends. I'm taking the advice from these people, and I'm taking the advice from these friends and these people that I look up to on the TV. And I was trying to get wisdom from all these sources, and I knew it wasn't really giving me wisdom. My brother had cards that I was starting to memorize before I was saved. It was the Romans Road. And I knew the Bible said, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." And I knew that the Bible says, "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." And I thought, I need to get on my knees and accept Jesus Christ as my Savior. And so I got on my knees and I cried out to God to save me. And I asked Him to forgive me for my sins and my life and who I was. And I asked Jesus Christ to save me. And I remember just going to bed that night in tears, feeling horrible about who I was. And I remember waking up the next morning, and I was an alcoholic. I couldn't get away from it. I remember waking up the next morning, and instead of thinking about alcohol, instead of thinking about drinking, instead of thinking about partying, I wanted to read the Bible. I wanted to be around Christians. I wanted to go to church. And I woke up and I thought, it's Sunday. I need to go to church. And I called my friend and I went to his church. And I was too embarrassed to go back to my other church because I wrecked my brother's car. I broke my nose. I was in court and they all knew that. And I went to my friend's church and I remember them preaching a message, and the whole time I thought, I don't want to ever go back to that lifestyle. I don't want to be this way anymore. And so from that time, I went up to the altar at the end of that service. I said, "God, don't let me go back. Whatever it takes, don't let me go back to that lifestyle. I don't want to be that way anymore." And I cried out, and some people prayed with me. They said, "What do you want to pray for?" I said that I wouldn't be tossed to and fro anymore, and that I would live for Jesus. And I started to be around Christians. I never missed a church service. I started to go to church all the time. And I got baptized. And it was not shortly after that the Lord showed me that He wanted me to be a preacher. And I had no idea what that meant or what I had to do. But I just eventually surrendered to that, and God gave me His desires, and Jesus Christ just changed my life. And it was about 6 months after I got saved. I went to a really strict Bible college where, they watched everything you do, and they had all these lists of rules and things you're allowed to watch, and how long you're allowed to be on your phone, and who you're allowed to talk to. And I was so busy. I got to Bible college and they just made us memorize all these verses, and I had verses all up in my room, and God just changed my life. And from that night that I got saved, I stopped smoking, and I dealt with alcohol for a few months, but all these things were I was set free from my sins, and Jesus Christ changed my whole life.